Umamusume Pretty Derby is an interesting game, and one that unfortunately sunk its hooks into me even beyond the hour or so of novelty you can enjoy from, well, playing a game where you train and race horse girls. I found this quite strange in a way because gacha games are not only a form of game I'm suspicious of on an ethical level, but also one I found it really hard to get into. The way gacha games make me feel constantly pushed to spend more money has always been rather alienating to me, and yet Umamusume, a Steam port of a mobile game, has become a comfort I keep coming back to. My conclusion, which is part cope and part analysis, is that I think what strikes me about Umamusume is it just gets why people care about sports. I've always had a passive interest in the world of competitive sports. It sounds strange then that I don't support a particular football team and I don't really know when Wimbledon is, other than kind of June, July. Yet occasionally I find myself drawn to the screen when a match is on. There's something about the highs and lows of a game, I think. The storytelling offered by sports has always captured me for more than just raw numbers. For that reason, I'm a big fan of a sports documentary. It doesn't matter much if I don't understand the intricacies of a sportsperson's chosen field, and in most cases I really don't. What matters to me is the documentary's take on superhuman athletes and its ability to capture just how human they are. Ultimately, I'm just a big fan of humans. Despite, well, not featuring human runners in a technical sense, I think Umamasume Pretty Derby has a pretty good grasp on why people like sports, both incidentally informed by its mechanics and also very intentionally. Here's why. But before we get into the full video, I'd just like to say I'm honoured to say that I've hit 3,300 subscribers. That's such a big number that my brain kind of short-circuited even saying the figure, which is quite strange. Either way, I've set myself a new goal for 3,500 this year, and if you could subscribe, that would really help. We've had just incredible growth recently, and if we could get up to there, that would be an honour. Anyway, let's get back to the video. This is Haru Aara. Oops, no, sorry. This is Haru Aara. Throughout her tenure as a racing horse, she racked up an unfortunate and staggering 113 losses. How many wins does this majestic horse have? I hear you shout through the screen. The answer, 0. Nada. Zilch. Despite this, she is still arguably one of the most famous racing horses in the world, and that's partially related to this pink-haired anthropomorphized horse girl of the same name. Her appearance in Pretty Derby shows her with frankly terrible stats, but an endearingly positive attitude and enough guts to feed a family of cannibals. Well, not guts the stat, they also suck. Just after the launch of Pretty Derby in the West, the website where you could pay $40 to buy Haru grass became so popular that it literally broke. This is because people love a story. They love an underdog, or should I say underhorse, and they love to strive for something. There are likely hundreds of horses that outpaced and outperformed Haru Aara, and yet it's her story that has endured. Now, Haru was already one particularly popular mare prior to the Western launch of Umamasume, but it's hard to deny this sudden resurgence of her fanbase being related to the pretty explosive launch of the game. This tweet talking about the donations is filled with fans showing proof of their donation alongside gifts of the pink-haired counterpart. These fandom stories happen all the time in games and aren't always actually caused by the game itself. However, I would argue in this case it's at least partially the result of the specific way Pretty Derby's story and character writing operates. If you are unfamiliar with the game, here's a quick rundown. You are a trainer, and you use carrots to randomly acquire characters to coach and support cards to give extra effects as they train. Off the bat, characters come with innate attributes plus distinct running styles, but there's also a sort of roguelite element to the game. You start a career run with a character and make them take on as many races as they can until they fail their objective, but even after this failure, your horse girl's career legacy goes on to deliver stat boosts to future trainees. Your Umamasume have 5 core stats, and a good balance of all of them is necessary to actually win races. These are upgraded via training missions, but it's the moment in between these missions that really define runs. You interact with other trainers, make decisions, and those decisions lead to both good and bad outcomes for your runner. The acupuncturist, who can give your horse girl major buffs or nerfs, is the purest version of a risk versus reward pull in the game, but fundamentally committing to any stat has the same relationship. There are only a certain number of days until the next race, each activity costs an entire day, so there's a pretty major opportunity cost associated with every decision, one that really makes you second guess yourself as you approach the end. Though Pretty Derby rewards you for winning, it's actually far more focused on the act of persevering and continuing, even and maybe even especially, in the face of loss. There's a cynical part of my brain that thinks it kind of has to in order to further incentivize people to spend their actual money on the game, and when I think critically about it, I do think this is true to an extent. Gacha games are both money and time sinks, so they can't afford to go easy on you. The upside of this is that the game allows you to weave your own stories out of your failure. Getting an F grade in the tutorial is just one example of this. There's a long path ahead of you, and that's not one forged by simply winning. There's a frankly very impressive amount of writing in Pretty Derby, and much of it is charming, thoughtful, and allows every moment to play into the character type's setup. As well as piecing together bits of story from playing the game, there's a separate section where you can play through stories for individual races. It's kind of great and gives you a real reason to root for the runners you pick. Then from here, the game's storytelling is occasionally roadblocked by making you beat races with horses made from careers in order to unlock it. This means even if you fail to run, that horse girl could still come in very handy. To add to this, distinct design language means that every runner feels unique. They respond to certain events differently, even though the basic stat changes are mostly similar. This gives a little bit of personality to each run. You are constantly rewarded with carrots, money, and a whole swathe of extra resources by just playing the game. The fact that stories earn you carrots does mean when you're just a few carrots off the next pull, you are sort of incentivized to just skip it, but maybe that's a me problem. However, if you take the time to actually watch the stories, they manage to give every runner a reason to keep running. Even those who seem fairly one-track minded, sorry for the pun, are given some depth, and this leads to a point where I can understand why almost any character could be a player's favourite. If a game is going to rely on the pretty predatory functions of a gacha game, making characters actually feel like characters certainly softens the blow. The story of sports is wonderful, but there's also an incidental dark side to it too, even beyond hooliganism, substance abuse problems, and the consequences of stardom. A sports person might seek to optimize their performance and exert the limits of their form in pursuit of glory, but they do so of their own volition, and it's they who reap the rewards. At a larger scale, and once we factor in the broader sports advertiser industrial complex, this is just increasingly not the case. To be denied a part of your agency and, in effect, a part of your humanity while having your body used in pursuit of capital gives a certain sting to everything, and one that works towards treating those bodies as machines, or, as I'd argue Umamusume understands it, livestock. The pursuit of competitive sport is fundamentally about being the best. Those who sit at the top of the pile have not only determination and grit, but genetics on their side. This makes them unique in their position. That unique element gives many of them a great deal of power and wealth, but it also sort of owns them. Footballers are footballers until their bodies can no longer carry them. American football has seen its fair share of controversy, part of which is focused on the NFL's potential culpability in inadequately protecting players from head injuries. CTE, a degenerative head trauma-related disease which has links to depression, problems with thinking, and dementia, is just one of the side effects of this brain trauma, and we've seen hundreds of players affected by it or suspected to have been after their death. Many athletes post-prime suffer from injuries specific to the fields they're in, and this is because they work their bodies incredibly hard. And on one hand, people want to do that. They want to be the best in the world and literally fight to do so. On the other hand, there's an industry here, an infrastructure. The athletes that go through these industries pave the path for future athletes, their talents and life's work propping up the next generation. But also the industry behind it allows athletes freedom to be their best. Ireland's Gaelic Football League, or GAA, earned around €132 million last year, and yet players are prohibited from earning a salary. This means counties can't just pay for the best players, but it also sets a cap on one's ability, as you might still need to work, and also means that you need a base level of privilege or luck in order to commit that time. There are roots in the British working class to football, and part of this element is that being good enough can pull you out of class. Well, at least financially, cultural classism is its own element. Someone competing in Gaelic football will only really do so because they love it, especially at the higher level, so if you are really disadvantaged enough and need to put food on the table, you will pick your survival over fitness any day. You will see some benefits in being a Gaelic football player, of course. You earn cultural and social capital, you can get brand deals for your skills, but there's a natural cap here that affects it on a systemic level too. Gaelic football teams don't have the cash for the types of facilities that professional English clubs can buy, and this does seem to help athletes get to the absolute max level they can. And this always leaves that question lingering in the mind. If we go back historically to athletes from the 40s, 50s, 60s, how many of them would or could have been better with access to what we have now? How many could have recovered from injuries quicker or worked smarter? How does one adequately compare someone running 40 years ago to one running now? And I suppose the answer is you don't. Every athlete makes up a step in a bridge that younger generations walk across now, perhaps not fully aware of all it took to get there. And this is something Umamusume touches on in both a textual and mechanical sense. Every time you start a run, you can choose legacies, which are previous runs you've had, and this will give you stat boosts as well as boons to training and the ability to learn certain skills. Those skills can be bought from skill points, which are earned passively through a dozen different activities, so this means you not only get an instant boost at the start of a run, but you can pair certain types of horses together to unlock the best skills. And skills are really how you win your races. There's an infrastructure at play in Pretty Derby, and one that relies on the efforts of hundreds of previous athletes, plenty of money, and a heaping of different resources. Those who play for some time will just have better horses. You can still luck your way into wins, but eventually the might of that infrastructure will win that marathon. But ultimately, like the athletes, you are also playing for the love of the game. For all your efforts, you get a few carrots and a song. Oh, you didn't know already? Pretty Derby is also sort of an idle game. This leaves an elephant, or should I say, horse, in the room. When we talk about the negative effects of the sports industry on the bodies and minds of athletes, it's hard to ignore that the idol element of Pretty Derby leaves a much more obvious parallel. The idol industry, specifically the Japanese idol industry that Pretty Derby is paying homage to, is a brutal one. And idols are controlled at almost every level. Their public image is very specifically preened to deliver a certain fantasy of desirability and availability, and the out-and-out dating bans that many idol agencies enforce is just one part of that. Though some claim that these bans are performance-based so as not to distract from work, and there's likely a grain of truth to this, it's hard not to see the image of idols given as being linked to perceived availability. And in a sense, this two-way model can be unfair to the sexuality and identity of those on either side of the idol relationship. There's a great deal of gendered violence, both physically and emotionally, hurled towards idols, and their working conditions are infamously incredibly tough. And the talents both earned through skills and genetics puts them in a place where they're risking their body for the industry they're a part of. There are clear links between idols and adult idols too, one where idols often flip back and forth between both, with some adult idols becoming celebrities and vice versa. This becomes a bit darker when you consider both sides of the industry can have strict contracts, or when we consider the social pressure that comes with doing whatever you can to make it big. Some idols are picked up from a very young age, and though they don't join the adult industry until they're of age, it's hard to believe the autonomy of those young women is fully appreciated as it should be when they are scouted at such a young age. Yua Mikami, who you may recognize from YouTube or perhaps a much more seedy place, the Yakuza franchise, was both an AV model and an idol at the same time. She joined the adult industry in 2015, leaving it in 2023, but was also part of idol group Honey Popcorn in 2018 and Ibizu Muscats in 2015. Honey Popcorn is a bit of an oddity in a way, as it actually had multiple AV actresses at one time. It seems more likely for an idol to become an AV actress than the other way around. Multiple members of AKB48 went on to become AV actresses, and it makes sense when you consider the selling point of the group, but we'll come back to that later. Before Honey Popcorn, Mikami was in SKE48, a sister group of AKB48. Back in 2013, Minami Minagishi, a member of AKB48, was caught spending the night with a member of Generation of Exile's tribe, which is a boy band. She was immediately demoted after this news got out, and a video of her with her head shaved was posted on the AKB48 YouTube channel, apologizing for her quote-unquote thoughtless behavior. Notably, the same punishment was not given to the boy here. It's worth noting that shaving one's head, especially for a woman, is often perceived to be a sign of flagellation, and the apology only further cements this. The Japan Times was critical of this, stating that the penance shows flaws in idol culture. Of course, the idol industry isn't exclusive to Japan. Korea has its own industry, and both have made waves in American copycats. The group Sorbet, who were based out of California, got quite a lot of negative attention for what some deemed to be Asian fishing, largely pointed at Berry, who is now actually a performing solo idol. Not all have been met with this ire though. This specific case seemed to be a mixture of indignation, boredom at least partially framed through what some believe to be justice, and one of many pretty awful trends of it becoming popular to just insistently hate people on TikTok. On a side note, if creators stay around just long enough, they often end up doing something just cringe enough for people to call it the X incident. A guitarist played the bass line to Electric Feel by MGMT by doing a very classic AC/DC style rock jump, and was immediately met with ire because, well, the bass tone in that song lacks the bite needed to justify the theatrics. For years, this creator had their comments filled with people saying Electric Feel incident. They appeared to ban the word now, and all I can say is, good for them. I can't imagine what it feels like to spend 20 minutes on a silly video only for a mass of both adults and teenagers to bully you endlessly for it. Obviously, this doesn't apply to everyone who participated in the trend, and the creator did seem to make fun of themselves too, and got a mighty platform in the process. In a similar vein, Berry, continuing from Sorbet, does appear to have gained some sort of following. The other two members of Sorbet appear to have entirely faded into obscurity. Not every idol group has been sicked with the same anger, and I think part of this is just luck. Cat's Eye, an idol-style group from LA, have become quite popular with their hit Gnarly, but these are just one of many who take some influences from the Japanese idol industry. Even they have been hit with some hate, which is partially inevitable, but also seems to be down to the crime of just being kind of cringe. There's a broader narrative that spreads around these types of creators, one where if someone removes those comments or broadly tries to stop a joke, it's because they're too sensitive. I do think that creators who take part in the joke are often doing the best thing, and it's a sign of some sort of resilience, but this is often flipped in a pretty miserable way. Rather than those who can take the joke being seen as positively spinning negativity, that becomes the standard, and those who can't keep up are just too weak. And I do get this argument from utility, the belief that being a bit thick-skinned is just good for having any sort of a platform, but just because things are that way doesn't mean they should be. There's a gulf of nuance lost between the hundreds of comments saying Electric Feel incident. To steal a quote I've only just now learned is from Men in Black, a person is smart and people are dumb. And it's hard not to see this cultural callousness as one that benefits the worst parts of existing in the online world. When Minami shaved her head, she was seemingly partly doing it to apologize to the management and partly to apologize to fans for perceived outrage. And I think it's worth asking, why would there be outrage? Why would the perception be that she did something wrong here? And to partly answer that, I'd say AKB48 are both an incredibly popular group and one with a very specific purpose. AKB48 have sold the most records out of any female Japanese idol group in history, and I think this is linked to the fact that this idol group's central gimmick was that fans could actually meet them. You could break through the parasocial barrier, a barrier which is tightly tuned and marketed, to meet the person behind the poster you have on your wall. So when Minami is found to have a partner, some sort of illusion is broken. It's no wonder that some idols from AKB48, especially if they've struggled to get into positions of prominence, may be offered adult roles like these, and it makes sense why those who have spent years collecting posters and CDs may go on to support them in their AV careers. AKB48 are credited with popularizing the high school uniform aesthetic that has become popular among idols, and I don't know what kind of link that may have to the AV popularity, but I don't know if I actually want that answer. There have reportedly been almost 500 members of AKB48 since its inception, and though fandoms form around individuals in these groups, they're treated as more replaceable, like livestock to be traded away as they don't perform. As well as the idol industry making its way culturally to places outside of Japan and Korea, there are homegrown parallels too, specifically to the era of boy bands. Boy bands are also preened with a specific story and distinct look. Narratives form, organic or not, around members, and these are intended to make them more marketable. There's been a common criticism levied against boy bands for years, one that you can spot succinctly in Bo Burnham's Repeat stuff. It argues that lyricism is shallow and vague enough to apply to any teenage girl, and like a form of romantic astrology, they will just pluck the words that apply to them. Where Japanese idols specifically, through control of their sexuality, look, and carefully managed image, have quite a large male fan base, boy bands are largely the opposite, engaging in the same marketing tactic but inversely. Korean idols seem to have flipped this dynamic somewhat, having quite a big women fan base. I will say, with both idol groups and boy bands, we acknowledge the theatre of it all. I've spoken to fans of both who more or less just see it as an aesthetic, and there is some truth to this. British boy band Take That started out playing in gay clubs as teenagers, but were quickly derided by men and embraced by women. This is a generalization, of course, with plenty of women disliking them and plenty of men liking them. My analysis is not about their ability to appeal to the ethereal or some other nonsense, but more so to become marketed to societally defined gender roles, as is the case with all idol and boy band groups mentioned so far. They're effectively marketed on stereotypes. Though it appears to have some root in religion, the Jonas Brothers wearing purity rings was just one extra notch in their chaste, good-hearted public image. Incidentally, the idea of one holding out for the right person, then writing love songs that could kind of be played to anyone, can engage with a form of parasociality and one that is incredibly marketable. These purity rings in image aren't too dissimilar to idols not having boyfriends or being able to get married. The real reason it feels different is that it's not systemic. It worked for the Jonas Brothers for a while as individuals, but if everyone who came after them were pressured to do the same, to repress their sexuality and expression, we'd be chopping away at just a part of their humanity when they wish to exist in the public eye. But these things don't mean people don't want to sing. It doesn't mean that people don't want to dance, and it doesn't mean they don't want to express themselves and entertain. I don't blame Pretty Derby for not going into those darker lows, but it does fundamentally look up to the highs of the idol industry, and this is how it hit my brain as I played. There's just a certain stink on it. That's not one that can't be reclaimed or reformed, but even the school aesthetic of Pretty Derby can be culturally linked back to AKB48's popularity of the schoolgirl. There are independent idol groups coming out unlinked from the industry behind it, but like my parallel between football and Gaelic football, money exploits, power corrupts, but it also builds infrastructure, and there's a devil's bargain at play here. Pretty Derby kind of has to take the bad with the good here, even if that bad is implied. And that infrastructure is the natural consequence of a game that wants you to keep playing, keep spending money. It wants you to log in every day and drip feeds you just enough that logging in every day does actually net you something. After the tutorial, I remember being distinctly set free to just do a run, and after 20 minutes of working towards a big goal, my training just hadn't been enough. You can get a rough idea of how your strength compares to other competitors, and I was told I had an outside chance of winning. I was predicted 6th, and that made that first place victory so much better. The race after that had my chances even worse, yet I still won. Then I got to the final and... well, I lost. You didn't think it would be that easy, did you? Thank you for watching my video on Pretty Derby. That was a bit of a strange one. It was a funny one to write, but I hope you liked where I took it. I think there was a certain point where I cut myself off from writing because I felt like it could be so much bigger, but at that rate, maybe a second video will pull it into focus more. I guess I'm cautious because I go on a lot of tangents in this, and I think a bigger video could become even more tangential. Either way, if you've been playing the game, let me know what you think, and let me know what you think to my analysis of these different structures and thoughts. I think there is something tantalizing about sport, and I think there is a deep darkness in it a lot, and one that I think everyone's kind of aware of. I don't think I'm shining light on something new here. I think it's just part of the conversation, and I think that can be fascinating in a way to see the depth of the sort of human soul that comes out from all of this. Yeah. Anyway, if you like this video, subscribing would really help me out. I just can't believe how great the last couple of months have been for subscriptions. Well, it's late, sorry. And yeah, at the start of this year, I told myself I'd aim for 1,000, and we're in August and we're at 3.3 thousand. It's just absurd to me. I've had more growth in the last 2 months than I have the prior 2 years. Something good is happening here, and I really appreciate that. I don't know how long people will continue to subscribe for. That peak video did really well, and I don't know if I see one happening like that for a while, but I don't expect it to, because that feels just phenomenal. I can't believe what's happened there. Anyway, yeah, I keep going on tangents. You can probably see how these essays come about as they do. Either way, if you liked, like. If you didn't, let me know what you don't like. We'll have a chat about it. And subscribing either way would really help me out. Thank you.